All right, welcome to another episode of Ricardo's Time. Today we have a very special guest. Her name is Tania Rak. She's a native of Mirupol journalist and a communication specialist. Welcome, Tania. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Ricardo. Thank you for inviting me. I'm big honored to be here and hope that our talk will be productive and hopefully interesting and maybe to a certain level helpful to someone.
I'm sure it will, absolutely. So I would like to start talking about your experience where you are originally from. You are from Ukraine, I know. You live now in Warsaw, Poland. I know you really have a hard time. How does this scenario impact your life?
Well, this is the question that I've been answering to for quite a long period of time, basically from the beginning of war. Yet I think that each time there is something new to speak about because there are lots of angles. You are quite right. These events shaped me a lot and changed me and my life, the way how I perceive certain things in life. And maybe for our audience, for those who are with us and who listen to us, it will be better if I break things into some parts. So to give the perspective and the background, yes, I'm originally from Ukraine, from southern east of Ukraine, Mariupol. And unfortunately, this city became internationally recognized for the most unfortunate events that could ever happen to the city. 3 years ago, when I was somewhere abroad at conferences, at events, and when I said where I was from, no one recognized this city. It was not a small one. It had 400,000 people living there, was an industrial center of Ukraine, also the dock, the port. And actually, it was given 50 with something, don't want to rely on the stats, percent of revenue when it came to heavy industry, like metallurgy in Ukraine. Of course, when I was talking about the city, everyone was like, so Mariupol, where's that? Is that in Ukraine? Maybe Russia? Where's that geographically? First time we're hearing about that. These days, I'm actually trying to dodge on this question, not because I'm hiding my identity or my background, but the point is that if I say that I'm from Mariupol, usually people change in their faces and they're like, oh my God, how are you? And I know that people actually ask it from empathy or from pure interest, but when you get this reaction for many times, it's a bit uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So with the beginning of war, I should say that my life changed drastically. I was not living in the city for the last year. I was living in Kiev. I was working there in comms and journalism, but I was in the city on the New Year at my family's house, at my mom's. And this was the last time when I was there. So my brain still remembers the city, how it was before. And that's why sometimes for me, it is complicated to comprehend how it looks right now. Because of course you can see the visual confirmation of what was going on, how it was going on, but your brain just cannot comprehend the picture of before and after because you don't have the real face, real time experience with that. So with the beginning of war, I made the decision to flee from Kiev because it was not very safe in the neighborhood where I was living. But at the same time, my family, for their reasons, as many inhabitants of Mariupol, they refused to flee. And that brought up the next issue. I lost touch with them, with my mom for 2 months, with my grandfather for 3 months. And during this time, I simply didn't know whether they were alive or not. And looking back, I don't know how I managed to make it through on the emotional level. And I'm saying that not to play a victim card. The war is clearly a complicated experience, something that you cannot simply be prepared to. But this is said from the perspective that the feeling of not knowing whether your most close people are alive is the worst one, and never ever I will wish anyone to go through it. They devastated 99% of the city. Infrastructure, 20 with something years of my memories,
Well,
family albums, and unfortunately, lots of people who I personally knew and who were close to me, they died being victims of the wars. Luckily, my family managed to make it out during all this time, thanks to my friends, thanks to my SFL friends, especially. I think, there is never enough to be grateful to people who were there for you in complicated times when you needed that. So I found out from WhatsApp message from the unknown number. There was a lady who said that my mom was alive and she was in the village out of the city. She was standing in a queue with her trying to get some humanitarian aid, that there was no connection because they cut the data stations, everything. And she said that, yeah, she gave your phone number on the piece of paper and asked to call you to say that she is alive. And I cannot describe my emotions in that feeling. I felt numb because from one hand, you are so relieved and so happy that she is alive, because everything that I saw, last picture was that the bomb hit the house. And I had no idea whether she stayed inside, whether she was in the cellar, where she was, whether she maybe fled for some shelter. No idea. And I had no one to ask about because neighbors who I was in touch with, they also left. She refused to leave till the last moment because she was taking care of my grandpa. And he's blind and he's 90. And that was just, complicating things. But then, of course, they started shelling harder and she could not make it to him. So none of them knew that both of them were alive at that moment. So long story short, I managed to find both of them and bring to Poland. And of course, there were lots of issues connected with settling down and several hours of bureaucracy and finding the apartment and job and language and integration process, because quite often when we are talking about moving out, fleeing from war, we talk about the initial part. So you have to flee from the danger. But once you flee, actually things get more complicated. And here's why. Because when a person is trying to survive the danger, the person is thinking with instincts. By instincts, I mean, you have to survive, you have to make it through. That's it. You are driven by these basic terms of safety. But when you break out of there, you are driven by more complicated things. You should not fight for your life, but you have to fight for the purpose in your life. And for many people, and I think that this is a universal truth for millions of people from Ukraine, for other millions of people from other geographical regions that also suffer from wars and military armed conflicts. You lost everything that you had behind, and you have to find new meanings. And the question is, what is my new meaning? What is the purpose? How? Because it feels like your roots and everything that you had behind was violently taken away. And that just brings up lots of existential crises and questions. And I think that people, they talk a lot about complications and refugee crisis and immigration, but they don't touch base about depression and PTSD that people face. And from the experience of my family and of my friends and families of my friends, I can say that this is real, because people will never ever think in the same way that they thought before, because we are not prepared to fight for our lives. We are not prepared to hide away from bombs, from military planes, never ever. And that's why our thinking patterns, they will change forever.
Wow, that's a really big adversity you're passing or you pass through. And I think it's very inspiring as well that you keep going and look for a new purpose with your family and loved ones. And I would like to ask you how Ayn Rand comes here in place. How did you manage to discover Ayn Rand ideas? How did you find out about Ayn Rand?
Well, I think that my initial acquaintance with her philosophy, with objectivism, happened 3 years ago. Back then, I went to the Liberty Con organized by Students for Liberty. It was in Madrid. And of course, liberal and libertarian values, they were always close to me. But then I come to the conference, and then I also discover people and the philosophy of objectivism. And there were lots of points that resonated with my perspective on life. The point is that, of course, I was reading some books, like, of course, I read Atlas Shrugged and other things, and Romantic Manifesto, and we can talk about many, many other essays that are not that popular. The point is that I started viewing that differently after the war, because we can debate on whether her views failed or whether they are applicable in the real life, but I suddenly started seeing her as a real person, in the sense that she also had to flee from the regime. And I think that it shaped her a lot. Maybe she would not be Ayn Rand if she did not lose, in a certain sense, everything that was in Russia as a Russian Jew, as someone who also had to face immigration. Of course, probably it was a bit a different context, but at the same time, I assume that she also faced this certain kind of identity crisis when you're shaped by the initial country and culture that you come from, but at the same time you spend your whole life in some countries in Europe, and then she moved to the US, and that also shapes you because you just as a human being get some points from both worlds, and you yourself look like a perfect combination. And also, since I said that war is a very tough time, and it brings both the best and the worst in people, and in me as well, I think that you just start to think more about how to reach happiness, how to take care about yourself more, but at the same time, how not to turn into a narcissist, and how to start prioritize yourself, but at the same time to take care about other people from the perspective of having the resource. And having the resource for that comes from rational egoism, where you prioritize your needs.
I see. And could you tell me a little more about that? It's very interesting. How do you apply rational selfishness or egoism to your life?
Well, this is something that I'm still learning. I was brought up in a culture of altruism, and frankly speaking, I don't think that it was a bad thing. In fact, 99% of people, they always want good. Good for other people, good for the world, good for changes in the world. The point is that the tools are different. And of course, if you are being brought up in the culture of altruism, and this is actually interesting that we're touching base on that, because just yesterday I was at the retreat with Ladies of Liberty Alliance, and one of my friends, a speaker, she was also talking about that, and I resonated with so many things. But getting back to the point, when you are being brought up in the culture of altruism, and this is also a post-Soviet country, and of course the ideology that was practiced by several generations that also stepped the new era, and now living in the democratic state, it also leaves its footprints. And of course there is also the aspect of gender upbringing, because naturally as a girl you're supposed to be more quiet, or more agreeable, or I cannot say that you are being taught the acts of service, but you are supposed to be nice. And to be kind, to be nice, these are two different things. I like people who are kind, and I'm trying to be kind in life as well. And I like to care about close people. But being nice is not applicable, because that means that you will result as a people pleaser. No one likes people pleasers. You won't like to be a people pleaser after a couple of situations where you understand that, okay, probably I should have taken care about myself firstly. And after a couple of situations, I realized that, okay, I have some problems with saying people no. And actually, sometimes you go over yourself just to take care about your close ones. In the end, I think that this approach fails because no one feels satisfaction. Like, I never want anyone to be obliged to me if I do something. If I do something, I do it from my willingness and purpose. But at the same time, I also don't want to victimize my needs to be nice to someone. And this is how I started the process of prioritizing myself. Of course, there are lots
Wow.
of complications because, you know,
Yeah.
with work,
Takes
you
time.
also you also need to take care about people doubled. But since I already told you, war brings up the best and the worst in us, and I think that it became much more radical. And in the times of war or any kind of perma crisis, you simply don't have the resource for the social pleasantries. It's yes and no, it's black or white. And I don't think that this is, you know, the best option, but this is how our brain functions in critical situations. And
Mm-hmm.
though I'm still in the process of learning, I found out that okay, I might feel uncomfortable when I say no in some situations that don't serve my emotional comfort or my goals or my needs, or simply I don't align with certain things, values, situations, people, etc. And I learned it the
Mm-hmm.
hard way because I know that I could have done lots of things in the different way, or maybe deal with certain situations or people in a different way. But it is what it is, and what I learned
Mm-hmm.
from that is that prioritize yourself firstly. Think about your needs. Think about what and how you can take care about yourself right now. If something goes against of your views, values, needs, don't get there. Listen to your gut feeling because you might regret. Usually, our intuition or our past experience, they call to us before we get them consciously. So if something tells you
Mm-hmm.
don't go there, don't do that. And then if you put yourself into this position where you already had the chance to take care about yourself, about your needs, then from this perspective, it is easier to find the resource to take care and to be helpful to other people. And, you know,
Mm-hmm.
Ayn Rand also once said that it's good to be motivated by the desire to achieve, but at the same time, it's not very healthy to have the desire to beat others. And this is just a call that
Mm-hmm.
you should not to a narcissist. Like, be egoistic, but um, don't turn to asshole. Excuse me for my wording.
Okay, no, not it's fine. It resonates a lot to me about being kind. You know, you should prioritize yourself. I agree with that, and I really like that you still we're all still learning, always learn something new. You know, and rational selfishness is not automatic. It takes time, and it takes also a lot of effort, energy, concentration, and experience. You know, to see what's good and bad for one's well-being. I would like to ask you one more question, Tania, and it's what do you love more about your job? What do you enjoy when you are in the process of working, being productive?
I think my answer will always be people. I really like people. I like to get to know them. I like to
Mm-hmm.
talk to people. I like to get to know them, their stories. And I think that this is something beautiful about human mind and human potential, like unlimited one. And usually I'm driven by the idea of delivering the experience, enriching experience, sharing experience. Doesn't matter whether this is my own or of a particular individual, or maybe sometimes it's even a collective experience. And when I get the feedback about covering stories, sharing stories, I think that, yeah, probably I did something right. I also like to experience freedom in different senses. And it's not like you can say, ah, yeah, you know, I'm a freedom lover. No, this is like what you practice and it's not who you are. Uh, but I think that there are lots of restrictions and there are lots of dogmas that exist in different society. I saw it in Ukrainian society, I see it in Polish society, I see it around the world when I travel. And I think that dialogue is basically the key to overcome it, to build a free future, to get away from unnecessary stigma, stereotypes, and simply to find the way and the key to happier living, to talking to other people, to the dialogue, basically. Communication, dialogue, core things.
Yeah. Wow, that's really amazing. Yeah, I think communicating to people and inspiring them, influence them, it's making an impact on them. It's a big thing. Also, just knowing new people and networking, it's also amazing. That was a really nice conversation, Tania. Thank you so much for this, and looking forward to talk to you. We saw us in Greece, in Athens, and then also in Portugal in the conference at the conferences. Looking forward to meet you in person again and talk.
Thank you, Ricardo. And see you somewhere in the world, as usually.
Yeah, absolutely. That's part of our job, right?
Exactly.
Thanks,
Bye
Tania.
bye.